All right. All right. All right. Well, sorry. Welcome to great day to you. Great day to you. Starting too fast. Good day to you, beautiful people. What up? What up? What up? Greetings to those on my YouTube channel. Greetings to those who are on Instagram. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Um, I'm excited. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Got the energy flowing. Going good. I'm excited to continue to read our book that we're reading uh, this time, Atlas of the Heart. But yes, all right, let's get into it. I'm sorry I'm late. I am like 8 minutes late. I need to work on this. I keep, every time I set up, I keep changing little things. So, like streaming on YouTube, I'm trying to fix things there, and I'm trying to fix things here on Instagram. But okay, I'm going to get it down, and eventually I'll have like a good setup that I can keep consistent. But yes, welcome to Reading with Jam. I am Jamal Calpin, also nicknamed Jam. There's a story behind that, but whatever. And I'm here to read some self help, personal development books for myself, but also for you. I am a voice actor, I am an actor, and I'm a, I guess I'm a proponent or a supporter of mental health and emotional well being, particularly more specifically for Black men, because I think that's something that's very important to us. It's very important for us, I should say. That is something that we have neglected, or it has been neglected in our lives for a very long time. But in the process of us becoming beneficial men, it's important that we grow in the area of our lives, our mental and emotional well-being, so that we can be whole human beings and beneficial to those around us for glory and for good. And I was already going to be reading these books. That was my intention. That's my plan, because I like to read, and I like to keep learning and growing and becoming my best self. So I am sharing this book, and I've been reading it for a little while. We've been reading some other stuff, but let's jump into it. We are reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and we are in finishing up chapter 2, because that's where we left off. Let me get my clock set up, so I'm here all day. But hopefully you all are doing well, having a great day. Your week is going well. We are in the last. We started the last. We're in the last like downswing of the year. So hopefully you're enjoying it. You're enjoying it. But all right, I got my time up on the clock. Let's get into it. So we're chapter 2 is. Let me bring up the title real quick. I appreciate that. Thanks for the love. All right, let me see. Let's keep going. Let's see. All right. So, but it's also good because I don't necessarily want to be attractive to you, but I appreciate it. All right. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Where are we? We are in chapter 2. Crap, come on. Wait, I went too far. No, wait, I'm good. Sorry. Chapter 2 of this book, and it's titled Places We Go When We Compare. And so we've been talking about comparison, talking about resentment, talking about jealousy, envy, admiration, reverence, and some German words I struggle to pronounce. But let's finish up this chapter and then move on. We are now on the section. Again, these German words be kicking my behind. This next section is entitled, let's see. Okay. No. The last one was Schadenfreude, right? Schadenfreude. Well, the next section is, I think, just Freude. No, Freudenfreude. So, Freuden. Hey, I'm struggling here. Freudenfreude. All right, let's get it. 30 minutes on the clock. Let's go. Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Chapter 2, section Freudenfreude. Freudenfreude. To end on a positive note, let's talk a little about Freudenfreude, which is the opposite of Schadenfreude. It's the enjoyment of another's success. It's also a subset of empathy. In a paper in World Journal of Psychiatry and Mental Health Research, the psychologist Catherine Chambliss examines the role the Freudenfreude and Schadenfreude play in depression. She writes, when others report success to us, they generally hope for an empathic response of shared joy, Freudenfreude. If instead they get a negative, competitive reaction, they may respond with confusion, disappointment, irritation, or all three. Ongoing lack of Freudenfreude eventually can pose a fatal challenge to a relationship, and in turn, relationship failure often produces depression. We suspected that depressed folks might exhibit deficiencies in Freudenfreude. I'm sharing this research with you because I think it's invaluable to understand. As Steve and I support our kids in learning how to cultivate meaningful connection with the people in their lives, we've always told them that good friends aren't afraid of your light. They never blow out your flame, and you don't blow out theirs, even when it's really bright and it makes you worry about your own flame. When something good happens to you, they celebrate your flame. When something good happens to them, you celebrate their flame. To illustrate, we'd have our kids hold their hands out, palms flat and open, and say, if this is your flame and the wind picks up, good friends cup their hands around your flame to prevent it from going out, and you do the same for them. No flame blower outers was our way of saying more Freudenfreude, less Schadenfreude. Freude. One last thing from this article. Show and Shoy and Bragitude. Okay. In an intervention designed by researchers to increase Freudenfreude, they coined two new terms to describe behaviors that were very effective. Shoy, intentionally sharing the joy of someone relating a success story by showing interest in asking follow-up questions. Okay, that's new. Shoy, and that's spelled Shoy. All right. Next one, bragitude, intentionally tying words of gratitude toward the listener following discussion of personal success. Bragitude. All right, moving on. I love these terms and their practical advice. When someone shares something great that's happened to them, we can show interest and ask questions. When someone demonstrates joy when we share ours, we can express gratitude. Thank you for celebrating this with me. It means so much that you're happy for me. Oh, that's sweet. Something about Freudenfreude, this word, something about Freudenfreude reminds me of a leadership lesson I learned in Abby Wambach's book, Wolfpack. Abby is a two-time Olympic gold medalist soccer player and FIFA World Cup champion. She was the United States leading scorer in the 2007 and 2011 Women's World Cup tournaments and the 2004 and 2012 Olympics. In Wolfpack, Abby writes about the point and run. She explains that every time she scored a goal, the first thing she would do is point to the person who made the assist or the coach who called the play. And the run was about celebrating another person's victory. She writes, you will not always be the goal scorer. When you are not, you better be rushing toward her. Okay. And then she has a picture of soccer or football, I should say. Oh, so that was the end of that chapter. I'm going to keep reading, but so yes, I think that was some good stuff there. Freudenfreude is more celebratory and encouraging when other people are successful. That's good stuff. All right, moving on to chapter 3. Places we go when things don't go as planned. Boredom, disappointment, expectations, regret, discouragement, resignation, and frustration. All right. First, boredom. Boredom is the uncomfortable state of wanting to engage in satisfying activity, but being able to do it. When we're bored, we experience a lack of stimulation. Time seems to pass very slowly, And if we're working on tasks, they seem to lack challenge and meaning. What's unique about boredom is that depending on that, yeah, what's unique about boredom is that depending on the situation, it can wind us up and leave us feeling irritable, frustrated, or restless. Or rather than getting us worked up, it can leave us feeling lethargic. When we have more control and autonomy over the boring tasks, it's more likely that boredom will leave us feeling lethargic. If we have little autonomy and control over the boring tasks, we are more likely to feel frustration. This resonates with me. If I assign myself something to do and it's really boring, I normally end up mindlessly scrolling on social media. If, however, I'm asked to do something by someone else and it turns out to be boring, I can get really frustrated and irritated. While most of us think of boredom as a negative feeling, it turns out that not all experiences of boredom are bad. In fact, if it weren't for boredom, you wouldn't be reading this book or any book by me. Let me explain the research first. A recent study showed that simple, boring tasks or mundane activities can allow our minds to wander, daydream, and create. The lack of stimulation that defines being bored gives our imagination room to play and grow. A big part of my book writing routine is watching super predictable, formulaic mysteries, even ones I've seen 10 times. These shows would bore me to tears in a normal state, in a normal mental space. But when I'm coding data and writing, something weird happens. It's like the show's lull. Pick up. It's like the show's lull. They easily distract a part of my brain into a rhythmic stupor, setting free the deeper, meaning making part of my brain to engage and start making connections between things that don't seem connectable. I actually sit on my couch with a notepad next to me because the more bored I get, the more ideas bubble to the surface. Highlight something else. All right. This has been my process for 30 years, which is why, from the time my kids were little, I never rushed to alleviate their boredom. If I could wait out the I'm so bored episodes, things would eventually turn quiet, and I'd find them doing something really important, like daydreaming or creating. I've seen Ellen turn a boring day into a fully choreographed pick up. I've seen Ellen turn a boring day into a fully choreographed song and dance routine to the Wicked soundtrack, and Charlie go from ugh, I don't know what to do to writing an illustrated book about rocks. As researcher and writer Sherry Turkle says, boredom is your imagination calling to you. That's that's good. I like that. Disappointment and regret. Disappointment and regret can range from mild discomfort to deep hurt. And in my experience as a researcher and a human being, we underestimate both in terms of the disconnection and pain they can cause within us and in our relationships. Thankfully, there are tools and practices that can help us better understand what's behind these experiences and how to better set ourselves up for less hurt when possible. Disappointment. There are many definitions of disappointment, but this one emerged from our data, and I think it's as clear and clean as it gets. Disappointment is unmet expectations. The more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment. Because disappointment and regret are so interwoven into our experiences of vulnerability and shame, I talk about them to some degree in all of my books. For Rising Strong, I did a deep research dive into both because it's a book about the stories we tell ourselves when we're hurting, and you can bet that these emotions are often front and center in these narratives. With disappointment, it always starts with expectations. I found two categories of expectations of my work: expectations that are unexamined and unexpressed, aka stealth expectations, and examined and expressed expectations. Unexamined and unexpressed expectations, or stealth expectations. Every day, sometimes every hour, We are consciously and unconsciously setting expectations of ourselves and the people in our lives, especially those closest to us. The unconscious, unexamined, and unexpressed expectations are the most dangerous and often turn into disappointment. In fact, the research tells us that disappointment is one of the most frequently experienced emotions, and it tends to be experienced at a high level of intensity. When we develop expectations, we paint a picture in our head of how things are going to be and how they're going to look. Sometimes we go so far as to imagine how they're going to feel, taste, and smell. That picture we paint in our minds holds great value for us. We set expectations based not only on how we fit in that picture, but also on what those around us are doing in that picture. This means that our expectations are often set on outcomes totally beyond our control, like what other people think, what they feel, or how they're going to react. The movie in our mind is wonderful, but no one else knows their parts, their lines, or what it means to us. When the excuse me, when the picture or movie fails to play out in real life, we feel disappointed. And sometimes that disappointment is severe and brings shame and hurt and anger with it. It's a setup for us and for the people involved. Disappointment takes a toll on us and our relationships. It requires considerable emotional bandwidth. Researcher Elaine Summerfield explains that we come away from the experience of disappointment feeling bad about ourselves and the other person. Our negativity is tinged with astonishment and surprise, and at the same time, we're trying to forgive. We're concealing emotions. We're trying to think positively and urging ourselves to move on. It's exhausting. I speak from experience. Here's a story that I shared in Rising Strong. For Steve and me, stealth expectations and disappointment have been the sources of some of our most difficult arguments and hurt feelings. About 10 years ago, we noticed a pattern where one of us would feel disappointment, resentment, and anger at the end of a weekend spent trying to jointly juggle our family's hectic soccer, birthday party, sleepover, school project schedules, along with our own personal obligations. It was so much easier when we were flying solo with the kids over the weekends. But how on earth could it be easier for Steve to hold down the fort when I'm out of town? Why is it simpler for me to navigate a busy weekend when he's out of town or on call at the hospital for hours on end? The arguments we had after we spent weekends together often ended with one of us feeling disappointed and angry and slipping into blaming mode. Our frustration would turn into hurtful jabs. You're not helpful. You don't make it any easier. You just make it harder. So painful. I finally said to Steve, I'm tired of this argument about it being easier without the other one here. It totally hurts my feelings. I feel like I don't belong here. Something about the story we're telling ourselves is not true. I don't believe it. He confessed that it also hurts his feelings. So we started examining the patterns. It took a lot of trial and error and sorry, and several near meltdowns until Steve finally said, when it's just me with the kids, I have no expectations for getting my own stuff done. I give up my to do list so I can actually enjoy the craziness. It was that simple. This fight was all about stealth expectations. To this day, when I'm on my own for a weekend with the kids, I clear the expectations deck. Back then, however, when Steve and I were both home, we set all kinds of wild expectations about getting stuff done. What we never did was reality check our expectations or make them explicit. We just tended to blame each other for our disappointment when our expectations weren't realized. Now, now, before weekends, vacations, or even busy school or work weeks, we talk about expectations. We specifically ask each other, what do you want this weekend to look like? I might say, this is going to be a busy weekend. I'm down for whatever we need to do, but I would like to swim at least one day and play pickleball for a couple of hours on Saturday. Side note, I didn't know pickleball was so popular, but hey, it's a thing. I think that's cool. All right. Steve might say, let's try to grab dinner, just the two of us, on Saturday night after we drop off Charlie. I like to play water polo for a couple of hours on Sunday. What time is pickleball? That doesn't mean stealth expectations no longer trip us up. They do, But now we help each other. We help each other reality check our expectations. We ask each other a lot of questions about what we think will happen or what we want to happen. And we often ask ourselves and each other, what's this about? What are you not saying? These are vulnerable conversations, but worth the discomfort. For example, with Steve, I want him to have a great weekend, and I know he feels the same way about me. I've learned that my expectations often come down to fear, a need for certainty, or a need for rest and play. It's just so hard to ask sometimes, but it doesn't stop me from expecting. We're also trying to teach our kids how to reality check, communicate, and dig into the intentions driving their expectations. We try to model the questions: what expectations do you have going into this? Excuse me. What do you want to happen? Why? What will that mean to you? Do you have a movie in your head? And in this perception driven world, the big question is always, are you setting goals and expectations that are completely outside of your control? Unexamined and unexpressed expectations can also lead to serious disappointment at work. In Dare to Lead, I write about the power of painting done. When I hand off an assignment at work, I will often say, let me paint done. And if I don't, you can be assured that the person on my team will say, I'm on it, but I need you to paint done. Painting done means fully walking through my expectations of what the completed task will look like, including when it will be done, what I'll do with the information, how it will be used, the context, the consequences of not doing it, the costs, everything we can think of to paint a shared picture of the expectations. It's one of the most powerful tools we have. All right. Here are some other examples of unchecked and unexpressed expectations that came up in the research for Rising Strong. It's going to be a great holiday. I've got everything planned to the minute. Is this a setup for success? What do you need from this gathering and why? Have you talked about your needs, or are you assuming everyone is on board? Have you shared your plans and talked about why they're important to you? Have you asked the other people what they want and need? This is the start of the example. My sister in law is going to love her gift and be so impressed with dinner. You have no control over her response. None. Is there something you need for yourself or your relationship that a gift and dinner won't deliver? If there's no response or a response that isn't what you expected, will you still feel good about buying the gift and preparing dinner? Example: I can't wait to share my project presentation with the team tomorrow. They're going to be blown away and really appreciate how hard I've worked. Reality check. Is there a way to feel validated other than your team's saying something? It's dangerous to put your self worth in other people's hands. Again, no matter what you do, you can't control other people's responses. These are recipes for disappointment and hurt. I know that asking for what we need and talking openly about our expectations is vulnerable. I'll pass on some advice that I got from a therapist early on in my marriage. I told this therapist that I was really pissed off because earlier that week, I had woken up on my birthday and there was nothing in the house celebrating my day. It was my first birthday after we were married, and there were no signs taped to the wall or notes on the kitchen table. Nothing. I told her that we did these kinds of things in my family, and it really hurt my feelings that Steve didn't do it for me. I was sure it was because he was too busy in his residency. The therapist asked me if I had shared my expectations with Steve or explained to him how we did it in our family and asked him to celebrate with me that way because it meant a lot to me. I rolled my eyes and said, if I have to ask, it's not worth it. She tilted her head and said, if you're not asking for what's important to you, maybe it's because you don't think you are worth it. Shut up. You don't know me. You're fired. That's her response. That's funny. Communicating our expectations is brave and vulnerable, and it builds meaningful connection and often leads to having a partner or friend who we can reality check with. Steve and I still laugh about this one. We were packing for spring break at Disney World when Steve, who was looking in my bag, said, "Babe, should we reality check expectations for the week?" Somewhat frustrated, I replied, "No, I think we're good, babe." Steve pointed to the three books I had stuffed into my carry on bag and said, "Tell me about those." As I started to explain that I wanted to sleep late, relax, and read some good mysteries over the course of our week away, I suddenly heard what I was saying. Who am I kidding? We're going to be at Disney World with 5 kids for 7 days. The only thing I'd be reading was a sign that says, "You must be this tall to ride this ride." Sure enough, we were out the door by 8 o'clock every morning of that vacation, and I didn't read a thing. But we had a great time. Once I had reality checked my expectations with Steve's help. That's funny. Examined and expressed expectations. Sometimes our expectations are realistic, clearly communicated, and self-aware. By self-aware, I mean we're not unconsciously trying to get needs met without directly asking for what we need. We understand the why behind the expectation. When we are intentional and thoughtful about our expectations and things don't turn out how we thought they would, disappointment still hurts. Potentially, a lot. One reason it can sting is precisely because we were vulnerable and asked for what we need or shared what we were excited about. Very early in my shame research, I interviewed a woman named Elizabeth. It's been 15 years and I still think about her story. After Elizabeth was told she was a shoe in for a promotion in her office, she learned that she did not get the position. She said, "I was most ashamed because I told everyone how much it meant to me. I talked about it with everyone: my husband, my kids, my neighbors, my mom, my colleagues. It's not that I told everyone I was going to get it. I was so honest about how much I wanted it. Instead of just feeling sad and disappointed, I felt sad, disappointed, and ashamed." When someone shares their hopes and dreams with us, we are witnessing deep courage and vulnerability. Celebrating their successes is easy, but when disappointment happens, it's an incredible opportunity for meaningful connection. Think how powerful it might have been for Elizabeth to hear, "You had such courage to apply for that promotion, and even more courage to be honest about how much you wanted it. I'm so proud to be your daughter, son, mentor, friend, parent." When we've self examined and shared expectations with someone and we feel they've let us down, it's important to keep the lines of communication open, circle back, and talk about our feelings and move to accountability. "I'll let you know how important this was to me. Dot, dot, dot." There is research that shows that one way to minimize disappointment is to lower our expectations. True, optimism can sometimes lead to increased disappointment, and I believe these findings are accurate. But there is a middle path, a way to maintain expectations and stay optimistic that requires more courage and vulnerability. Examine and express our expectations. There are too many people in the world today who decide to live disappointed rather than risk feeling disappointed. This can take the shape of numbing, foreboding, pick up. This can take the shape of numbing, foreboding joy, being cynical or critical, or just never really fully engaging. Sometimes, when I'm in one of those moods where I just want to pull the covers over my head and stay in bed, and there were many of those days during quarantine, I promised myself that I'm going to get less excited about things so I feel less disappointed. Then I always remember this interview I did with a man early on in my research. He was in his 60s, and I'll never forget how he looked at me when he said, "I used to think the best way to go through life was to expect the worst. That way, if it happened, you were prepared. And if it didn't happen, you were pleasantly surprised. Then I was in a car accident and my wife was killed. Needless to say, expecting the worst didn't prepare me at all. And worse, I still grieve for all of those wonderful moments we shared and that I didn't fully enjoy. My commitment to her is to fully enjoy every moment now. I just wish she was here now that I know how to do that." I don't like the vulnerability of leaning into good things, or the uncomfortable experience of examining and expressing my expectations, but I consider it more about discomfort than pain, which is what I heard in this man's voice. I've heard people say that disappointment is like a paper cut, painful, but not long lasting. I do believe we can heal disappointment, but it's important not to underestimate the damage it inflicts on our spirit. When I was researching Daring Greatly, I watched the magnificent Japanese animated film Spirited Away, written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. There's a scene in the film where a young boy named Haku, who has taken the form of a dragon, is being attacked by a relentless swarm of birds. The attackers are actually origami birds, and they cut into Haku, leaving him battered and bloodied. Disappointments may be like paper cuts, but if those cuts are deep enough, or if we accumulate them over a lifetime, they can leave us seriously wounded. Yes, it takes courage to reality check, communicate, and dig into the intentions behind our expectations. But that exercise in vulnerability helps us maintain meaningful connection with ourselves and others. I think I'm going to stop there for today. So we're still in chapter 3, and we have more sections to go, but my clock is running down. Uh, I think this is really good. Again, so far in the book, I think the book overall is really good. Um, we're reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And today we were mainly covering or starting to cover disappointment, which we covered some other stuff. So we covered boredom, which I think was really good. So the title of this chapter is number 3 is places we go when things don't go as planned. And so the first thing she mentioned was boredom, which the flip side of boredom is it creates space for creativity and imagination. And I've heard that before. Like we should not run away from boredom, which is something that we're taught, like, or something that we desire. We never want to be bored, but there's power, there's usefulness to boredom. So whether it's you're sitting in a classroom if you're a student, or if you're sitting at a job, or maybe you're on a commute, boredom gives space for your brain and your mind, and I would say even your soul and your spirit to explore and do different things and think of stuff and be creative and observe things that you maybe wouldn't have observed before. But I think we currently live in a society so committed to not being bored that we'd rather be distracted by anything than to sit and be alone with ourselves, to be alone with our thoughts, to be alone with spirit, God wanting to talk to us and talk through us. But as she encourages in this book and says that, you know, boredom, well, she quoted somebody, Sherry Turkle, who said, boredom is your imagination calling to you. So, like, don't run away from boredom. Embrace it. Make room for it so that imagination, creativity, I would say spirit, can speak to you. The next thing we talked about was disappointment, or what she talked about was disappointment and how disappointment can come from either unexamined and unexpressed expectations, also known as stealth expectations, and examined and expected expectations. And I think that's so important. She used a lot of examples when it came to relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or whatever. But the thing that I like that she clarified is that in expressing your expectations and examining your expectations, it takes vulnerability to then share those things. It requires you to be brave. It requires you to be vulnerable and courageous to share those things with others, whether they are friends, family, romantic partners, or whatever. Expectations are important, and it's better for you to do the work of sharing those things, even if they don't work out the way that you want. It's better for you to actually make room for those things and to communicate those things instead of just holding them in, because that can increase the pain of disappointment. And I think the next section is about regret. So I'm looking forward to her talking about that. But there are definitely some quotes and comments that she shared in there that made me reflect on how I haven't done a good job of respecting and honoring other people's expectations. People can share with you, hey, this is what I'm looking for, or this is what I'm expecting of you. And, or this is, not, it may not even have to be directly with me, but like, I'm expecting this to happen. And being there to experience the person's disappointment and not playing the role of comforting them or acknowledging their disappointment and making room for it, that can be very selfish. And I don't think it was, when I did it, the intention may not have been to have been selfish, but I can understand that that was the impact of not comforting somebody, because we like to celebrate people and celebrate with people, but even scripturally, we're also supposed to mourn with people and be empathetic with people. Like if somebody is going through a hard time, if somebody did have a disappointment, we don't have to just like automatically have like toxic positivity, and say like, oh, it's gonna be all right. But no, you can acknowledge like, yo, that really sucked. That didn't work. I understand that didn't work out the way that you thought it was. Like that's grimy. Whatever the situation was, that I'm sorry that didn't work out the way that you wanted it to. And I can understand why you feel hurt. I can understand why you feel disappointed. And I feel bad. I feel bad because I know I've dropped the ball in different scenarios like that. But I'm grateful to be able to read something like this to get more heightened understanding of why it's important to show up for somebody in the highs and the lows. And that includes dealing with disappointment. It includes understanding the expectations that are expressed, examined and expressed and all that stuff. So I thought that was really good. It's definitely a challenging thing, something to mull over and think about in regards to disappointment. And also wondering for myself, because I felt, in the last story that she shared from her previous book about the older gentleman who was going through life really with super low expectations, with the which in itself and like a self-preserving kind of thing, to have super low expectations because you want to protect yourself from getting hurt. And it's really not a good way to live life. And I know I've done that. Um because you're afraid of what the disappointment might be. You're afraid of what the pain will be if things don't work out. And so in the story that you're sharing, or what the guy shared, is that he was going through life always expecting the worst, and then he lost his wife um, in a car accident. And even though he was expecting the worst, it still hurt, and I'm sure it hurt like hell, like to lose the love of your life. Even if you're trying your best to guard your heart and guard yourself from pain of disappointment and the pain of loss, it's still going to be there if it's a painful situation. And when you approach life, which is kind of, I guess, the advice that he vowed to commit to, is like, but if you choose to always engage with life guarded and never fully engaged, that diminishes the experiences that you have. As like for me, for example, in hindsight, I can say this. My wife and I went, we decided to RV full time in 2019. So from pretty much the beginning of 2019 up until COVID, right? And it was a great experience, but it would have been a greater experience if I was more fully present. And in hindsight, yes, I regret that. I regret that I didn't show up well for myself, but also I didn't show up well for my wife in that experience, because one of the main things that I was focusing on rather than being present was money and making sure that I was providing and playing my part. But if I had more committed to being fully present and being open to everything that was happening then, instead of being so much in my mind and focusing on my own expectations and being selfish. I've heard this saying about life that, you should lean into the curves of life instead of like putting on the brakes and being so cautious. Like when you lean into it, everything flows better, everything goes well. And I think having those thoughts of worse expectations, having low expectations, and kind of just being a jerk the whole time, it tainted the experience. It tainted the experience for myself, and it also tainted the experience for my wife. And I'm very apologetic of that. And I've apologized to her about that. But I realized that again in hindsight that you need to be present. You need to stay present in what you're experiencing. And don't be afraid of experiencing life, even if that means you may experience the pains of life, even if that means in your vulnerability and having expectations um, that things may not go your way. It's better that you lean in all the way in, that you embrace it fully than playing it cautiously. Because the thing is, you can play it cautiously and still lose, but you could play it full heartedly, lose, and it may hurt, but play it full heartedly and win everything. Like, I don't want what I'm learning is I don't want I don't want half-ass stuff in my life anymore. I and whatever I do, and particularly with the experiences that I get to share with the person I love, like my special person. Like I don't want lackluster things. I don't want a lackluster life. And God, I know God doesn't want a lackluster life for me. And so having cynical views, having very guarded views in regards to like expectations and things like that, trying to avoid pain doesn't help you to live that way. It doesn't help you to live in vibrant excellence. It doesn't help you to live a free life. And I think a lot of men are that way, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. Like we are at this point, a lot of what we've been told is, kind of don't give yourself completely to a woman. Don't give yourself completely into anything that you're doing, except when it comes to like get this paper or, like sports or something like that. But when it comes to deeper things of the heart, that requires vulnerability, that requires emotional awareness, stuff like that. They're like, no, no, play it back. Keep your things close to you. But that's not really helping us to fully live and to fully appreciate the things that we have, the experiences that we were able to experience. But okay, I feel like I've ranted enough. Yeah, I think I've ranted enough. But that to me today, that would be one of the main takeaways is like, don't don't let the fear of disappointment stop you from fully embracing your life. You have to embrace it. Like, have your expectations, be open and honest about them. Again, with people that you care about and people that you value, but be vulnerable, be open to it, and embrace it fully. Don't be guarded. Um, yeah. But all right. Again, that welcome. Thank you. I was going to say welcome, but thank you for those who joined. I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Again, we were reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. We are in chapter 3, and we'll continue the reading tomorrow. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Again, have a great day. And Black man, if you are watching this, I believe in you. You're called for great things. You're called to live for glory and for good. Keep doing whatever you can. Make time to protect your mental. Find time for an emotional release valve and keep striving to become your best self. And I will talk to you all later. Peace.